Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to EIG's 44th webinar on B2B New Product Blueprinting Demo. Meet customer expectations the first time. With the AIM Institute's blueprinting online software resulting in lower new product development execution time and cost. This is the fourth in a series of webinars with Dan Adams in the AIM Institute. The first webinars focus on de-risking NPI and large-scale projects. Today, we will focus on how new product blueprinter accelerates your team's time to develop value-based B2B products that meet customer expectations the first time. Our goal is to provide you B2B NPI best practices and align digital tools to increase the productivity and effectiveness of developing new products and services. Please have your cell phone handy and open up the window on your browser and log in to Poll Everywhere website at pollev.com/Jim DeVries 073. You can also find the link in the chat box. Again, thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar on building the evolving resilient enterprise. We appreciate that you're taking this time to be with us today, especially in light of the coronavirus pandemic, and we hope that your family are happy, healthy, and safe. Just a little background, my name is Jim DeVries, founder of Enhanced International Group. We are a group of passionate experts to guide your transformation. EIG is an exchange of over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers focused on enabling your enterprise. EIG serves as the master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We are all dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's tenured experience. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, positive margin growth, the competitive advantage, focusing on the 90-day plan. We hope you find this information useful for you and your teams, and we welcome your questions and comments to support you in your efforts. Please have your cell phone handy or open up another window on your browser and log in to Poll Everywhere website that you find in the chat box. Since March of 2020, our webinars have focused on people, process, data, and technology. We've had fireside chats covering everything, of course, from COVID to the visible, resilient digital ecosystem, creating or establishing a resilient enterprise, new product introduction and digitalization, which includes this tool, and balancing lean and supply chain risk management with DDMRP. If you have future fireside chat topics that you would like, please let us know. Give us a ring at jdevries@consultingeig.com. Our upcoming webinars, next week we'll have a webinar from Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium on supply chain risk and resiliency, their prescriptive 90-day action plan, how to build that action plan model. The second webinar that we have coming up is a fireside chat on practical artificial intelligence for focus on financial services and fintech. And then we'll be back here with another supply chain risk and resiliency webinar on December 7th. And then we're going to end the year with a fireside chat on new product development and execution, leveraging Agile for ideation and phase gate for execution. Certainly a hot topic. Our past webinars are free and can be found on EIG's website, consultingeig.com. Today, we're fortunate to have with us a highly respected leader in NPI, Dan Adams. Dan is the author of New Product Blueprinting, the Handbook of B2B Organic Growth. Dan is a recipient of numerous patents and innovation awards, including a listing in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Dan has spent 29 years of Fortune 500 experience in marketing, product development, strategic planning, business development, and leadership. Dan's philosophy is understanding the inside experience. Before launching New Product Blueprinting, and Dan launched the AIM Institute in 2005. Dan, a few words of introduction, please.
Well, thanks, Jim. I'm really glad that we could be together here, and thanks everybody for joining us. Today, we'll really talk about that front end of innovation. And, you know, you've got technical risk and commercial risk, and we're going to go over some methods to get rid of almost all the commercial risk. So We know exactly what customers want. So that's what we have on tap for today. And again, great to be here.
Thanks, Dan. So before we get started, again, please do log into polev.com. And let's see if I can get the slides to move. And just to let you know, this is the fourth in a series of webinars, the new product blueprinting, and we'll probably in January, we'll go into voice of the customer. Our agenda today is focused on the following. We'll kick it off with identifying the need, the organic growth imperative. Second, the value, the B2B advantage. Third, the first how, divergent and convergent interviews. That's really interesting and fun. Next, we'll do the second how, the virtual voice of the customer. And fifth, Dan will provide us a case study and demo. Of course, this is an interactive webinar. Please enter your questions in the chat and or QA dialogue boxes within the Zoom platform and participate in the polling. Thank you so much. So here we go. So who's going to win? This is the question that you see on CBS or NBC or Fox News every day. Who's going to win this going forward? A lot going on there in the marketplace. With the impact of COVID pandemic continue to linger, new product launches and supply chain execution priorities continue to be disrupted. We are at a very pivotal stage as we move to get our businesses back online to survive and thrive. EIG's longstanding partner, the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, has modeled this as the W recovery in 3 Rs: respond, recovery, and renew. Whomever can renew the quickest will gain their unfair market share. A great enabler is incorporating the new product innovation and digital transformation within your recovery, so it is all done faster than your nearest competitors. NPI and digital transformation and other large-scale projects involve risks. The AIM Institute's NPI blueprinting tool that we will discuss today provides a fast path to developing a new product, proactively addressing market changes and trends. Furthermore, blueprinting digital platform provides real-time visible execution oversight while driving the speed of your product and services launch to the marketplace. As we engineer our product lines to meet the changing demand due to all these disruptions, push supply chains to take out costs and survive, while at the same time increasing resiliency in the supply chain, the impact of those risk events are becoming more pronounced and with a more fragmented supply chain. This greatly affects our ability to create new products and services, as well as executing programs, especially when you can't get your products and your suppliers to bring you your products or your supplies that you need to make your products. So this essentially results as even greater risk to execute, thereby an even ever greater need to de-risk your activities to increase your product development speed to execution. Companies that leverage de-risking and blueprinting principles for new products and services while leveraging innovation and digitalization to create differentiators will definitely be the winners. So we have a couple of challenges ahead. So we have the growth challenge. There's actually 3 types of growth, and you can only control one of them. Imagine, someone said, if we had a 5% growth this year, so we should be able to hit 8%, right? That would make sense. You probably think that 5% is in the bag, but it's not. Some of that growth is inherited growth from the innovation that occurred a long time ago. Don't count on that continuing forever. Some of that is market growth. A rising tide lifts all boats. But if a competitor creates a blockbuster, your growth could be negative, resulting in market share loss. Then we have earned growth. Only occurs when you do a better job than all your competitors in meeting the customer needs. So the earned growth is the only growth that you can control. In many companies, it is a very small number, which is masked by all this unearned growth. Love that slide, Dan.
Thanks.
So the second growth challenge that we have is the market growth is usually a zero-sum game. If the market is growing at 3%, does your company expect to grow at that same rate, a higher rate, or a lower rate? How fast are competitors planning to grow? The same, higher or lower than the market? So all the suppliers to a given market are planning on growing faster than the market. So as Dr. Phil would say, how's that been working for you? This raises difficult questions about how we will win while others lose. But that isn't all bad news. There's actually is a fairly easy way to win today, and we'll discuss. Dan will talk about the innovation wave, but before let's start with a survey question to gain your perspective of your priorities. So if you would help me out and join in this survey by clicking on that link in the chat box, pull EV, Jim DeVries 073, and help us out by ranking in order your new product development focus. Is it next gen products? Is it geographic expansion through current products? How about expansion of new supplier capabilities or new adjacent technology, or maybe a greenfield market? So what are folks doing out there? Would love to get your feedback on this. Dan, what have you been seeing with all your clients lately?
Well, there's been some data by Bob Cooper that shows that really over the last 15 to 20 years, companies have slid more into the incremental mode, and they've been fearful of doing the more breakthrough, really dynamic innovation. I think what's happened is a lot of companies have felt a little bit burned. I remember when I worked inside of chemical companies, we would have these great hope projects, and they would usually end with a whimper after, we sunk several $1 million into it. But I think if we do a better job of understanding customer needs in the first place, we can have a lot more success with the more transformational projects. So that's what I've been seeing.
So because of the pandemic, did you see a shift in things, or is it pretty much what you expect?
I think it's pretty much continued on that trend of incrementalism. I do think there's a desire, though, to step out more, and people are looking for ways of doing that. So I think there's a real interest. I think there's more of a recognition that we can't just keep incrementalizing. We need to really deliver some serious innovation to our markets. Mm-hmm. So recognition, I don't know if there's a lot of success yet.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to check the chat. But thanks everyone for participating. Appreciate it. It's a very interesting topic. What I've seen is exactly what you said is, people are scared to launch products, but this is the time to launch new products. You see the folks that are really gaining market share are the folks going out and launching new products. At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of folks actually made things that they never made before, right? Because there was a need. But now, just like I saw in the news yesterday, there's too much Clorox on the market now. They gear it up. Now they don't know what to do with it. So because everybody says we don't need Clorox. We don't need to be clean anymore because we have the jab.
Or we have a basement full of Clorox already.
Or we have a basement full of Clorox that we said we were going to do something with it. All right. So Dan, you go ahead and take over.
Yeah, let me go ahead. I'll share my screen. If you stop sharing just for a minute here, Jim, and
sure.
And then we will go ahead and let me see if I can do that. You see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is work by Bob Cooper, the father of StageGate. He found that when companies do their front-end work, whatever it is they do before they go into the lab and push back the frontiers of modern science, he found they only have a 25% success rate, and that's on average. Now, if you think about it, if a company is doing Six Sigma and they succeed, they've got 3 defects per million attempts. And here we are with 3 defects per 4 attempts. I mean, where else do we have this level of waste and inefficiency, right? So what must change? And I think we can start to get at this by asking some questions. One question I used to ask when I was doing in-person workshops was, does your company have bright R&D people? And people would always say, yeah, we do. That helps us solve customer problems. Even the marketing people would say, yeah, our R&D people are pretty bright. Then I would say, well, what about your competitors? They'd say, yeah, they've got bright R&D people too. So how are we going to win? if we don't have brighter R&D, do we have harder working salespeople? Do we have more persuasive marketing people? So most people struggle with this. How do we consistently win? So my question is, what about this? What if your R&D worked only on problems that customers truly cared about, while competitors kept guessing what to work on? And it may sound harsh to say most B2B companies are guessing, but in fact, I'll show you some data, some research that we've done on that before we're done today. So we really have two innovation problems. The first one is, what's the right question? In other words, what does the market want? Second one is, what's our solution? What's the answer? Now, it turns out that on average, companies are spending about 90% of their new product development budget on the answer and only about 10% on the question. And research shows that they would bump that 10% up higher, they would be more successful. Also, the other question would be, which of these problems causes most new product failures? Well, we can go back all the way to 1971, and the answer was inadequate market analysis. And a more recent study, 5 decades later, found the same thing. So we've got a problem here, but it's actually more than just underinvesting. I love stage gate processes. In fact, I'm working with the managing director of Stage Gate International right now on a new ebook for this. But here's the thing. Many companies, if they have a stage gate, if you ask them, well, whose idea is that over in that idea generation area? Is that your idea, or was that the customer's idea? Now, what are they going to usually tell you? You got it. Most people will say, well, that was our idea, something we thought the customers wanted, and then we validated it, we developed it. And then you ask them, well, when did you really do, an assessment of market needs? Well, I don't know. I guess we launched our product and we could see if anybody wanted to buy it, I guess. So that's how many companies do things today. They start with the supplier solution and they end with the market need. And what we're proposing is you switch this. You start with the market need and you end with the supplier solution. And so, Jim, I'm going to let you take it back. I'll stop sharing, and I think you can take us to the next step on this.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Can you see my screen okay?
Sure can. Yep.
All right. Perfect handoff. So next we'll get into the B2B Advantage. Sorry. So this is a great slide that Dan put together on the B2B Advantage. If we're gathering customer insights about belts, would you rather interview someone using a belt to convey iron ore or hold up your pants? Love it. B2B customers can usually offer more insight through the following. First, knowledge from years of education, training, and time on the job. Second, interest. Your new product could have a huge financial impact and make them a hero at work. We are all about making heroes, right? In contrast, you may have to pay customers to come to a focus group. So we want to get those heroes out there. Third, objectivity. Due to B2B group discussions, procedures, and accountability. And then fourth, foresight. Since they are in the business of making money, they can predict how you could help them do this with financial objectives and predictable benefits. And then concentration. Instead of millions of buyers, now we have far fewer. So what does this come down to? So what? So for knowledge, for B2B customers, they're able to help a supplier design better products. If they're interested, we'd be willing to do so. If the customer are objective, then their decisions will be rational and stable. If they have foresight, they can tell you their needs before seeing a prototype. And if industry concentration is high, you'll be able to directly influence their decision-making through face-to-face interviewing and follow-up. You can use the AIM Institute's free service to learn about B2B in your market segment. So going back to the agenda, we're now on the first how. the divergent and convergent interview. Before we get into that, we have another survey question to ask on what percentage of your NPI products do you perform voice to customer interviews? Less than 25%, 25 to 50%, 70 to 92%, or essentially all. So go ahead and answer that. So Dan, what are you seeing right now as your new clients and existing clients? How do they move from where they're at today, and then after having the blueprinting tool, how does that change generally of what you see?
Yeah, well, it depends how they define voice of customer. Once they understand what can be done with voice of customer, which is, I think, should be qualitative and quantitative, the answer is it's way below 25% for the average company. Now, once they get training, then they bump that up. Our clients who are doing blueprinting don't do all their projects. Some of the smaller ones, they'll do without a lot of VOC. But I was just with a customer today. They've been using our methods for many years, and they will not allow anything in their product pipeline to go into the development stage unless they've done the qualitative and quantitative. So they're probably in the 50 to 75% range, and then the rest will be small projects that don't really justify that level of investment.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think it's hard to do it for every product and every upgrade of a product throughout the life cycle.
Yeah.
I generally find that if you have a product that's stalled and you're not sure why, you're losing market share, this is a great tool to really grab that product and move it forward at a higher level. Just the interaction with your customers can win you orders just by going and talking to them, because they forgot you had it. They didn't know you had an upgrade. They didn't know what you're doing. So sometimes speaking to customers is good in this type of a format versus just order taking. So, all right. So I'm going to move on here and talk about new product blueprinting, the overall process that Dan developed over years, and the new product blueprinting gains to these B2B insights. So first, you identify the most attractive market segment to pursue. So that market research. So you're not doing beautiful product development for an ugly market segment. Second, we'll talk about these two types of interviews, the discovery and preference. Discovery interviews are qualitative and preference quantitative. Discovery uses divergent thinking, and the preference uses convergent thinking, and it converges on the needs customers care about. This lets you create a market case, which is less work than the full business case that you'll see in a minute, and is enough for many small projects. Then you'll do the side-by-side testing of competitive products. You and your team will set your new product objectives, and you'll spend some time brainstorming possible technical paths forward. And you'll wrap up the front end with a business case that justifies moving into the costly development stage. Then you'll go to the product development stage and launch your product. So you start with customer outcomes, then you go to the solution space. Coming back to discovery and preference interviews, during the discovery phase, we look at the customer sentiment, qualitative assessment. Then the preference interview, we're looking at the qualitative assessment. And we're also looking in the discovery process as a divergent process and the preference interview as a convergent process. We do this to uncover and the customer define desired outcomes. Then we gain consensus across the customers aligned to market segmentation. We can become confident that we're focusing on the right features. Then we'll look at all our solutions aligned to the technical requirements with some good brainstorming. It's a beautiful process, Dan.
Thank you.
So the customer outcomes that we're talking about. So what does it mean by that? Here's an example that Dan put together. There's of the conveyor belt that we were talking about before. So outcomes you might think are higher fill levels, less slippage with wet ore, but they're just desired customer end results, not necessarily customer outcomes. So two principles are key when coming up with an outcome. First, the customer value is only created when an important unmet outcome is improved. Customer value is not created in your laboratory or factory only when some customer process or product down the value chain is improved. Very important point. Second, so the better you understand these outcomes, the better your growth will be, right? So the outcome is the key. And the next topic here is we would like to share with you some of the AIM Institute's secret sauce here. It took AIM Institute nearly 10 years to figure all this out. But blueprinting is really about a science of B2B customer insight. We always would talk about how it's a science. Is it an art or is it a science? Can we make it a science, right? Common discussion. And it's all about the study of customer outcomes. Just as a microbiologist slides a specimen under a microscope, so blueprinting allows you to turn up the magnification on each outcome that matters. The first three levels occur during the discovery interviews, the next three during the preference interviews, and the balance are captured through later blueprinting steps. You can read more about that in the white paper. This science lets you dramatically reduce your risk, and Dan will explain that in detail in the following slides. Dan?
All right. Yeah, you bet. I'm going to share my screen again here, and we'll go right to that. And if I would have been on top of it, Jim, I would have had the next slide already, wouldn't I? Hang on one second here. But we'll go there right now. Let me just grab that. Let's see. Sorry about that. That was my bad. Here we go. Okay, so imagine this. Imagine that you are making maybe a paint ingredient, and you're going to be trying to understand the needs in the market for semi-gloss paint. So you're interviewing a bunch of paint producers, and you're going to go out and do discovery interviews of maybe 6, 8, 10 of those producers. So what they would see, you would actually project your notes so they can see it. You'd start off with a couple of real easy questions. We call these current state, just to mostly get them comfortable. Then you would say, well, tell me about what kind of problems you're having with either the production or the sale of semi-gloss paint. And on note 1, they might talk about cleaning food stains, and note number 2, pencil marks, and note number 3, dirt pickup over time. By the time you get to note number 7, they're talking about wanting 1-coat paint. But you're really asking them, what problems do you have? And they're leading you to the next one. It's almost like a brainstorming session. You say, what else after each note? Now you're going to be probing. We have a lot of probing techniques we teach our clients, and you're going to probe deeply into each of these outcomes. 1 outcome per sticky note. Now, when they run out of problems, you'll say, well, what would your ideal world look like? And you're still getting 1 outcome per sticky note. And if you still have time, you'll say, well, let's take a look at this trigger map. Let's look at environmental, demographic trends, and so forth. Does that trigger any new things you'd like to see? And there's various trigger maps you can use. We have a lot of pre-recorded ones you can alter. Now, at the very end of the discovery interview, you say, well, listen, this is great. You've given us 25, 30 outcomes on these sticky notes. Boy, we sure could use a little help prioritizing of everything we talked about. What were your 5 to 10 top picks? And then you would mark those. Now, imagine you did that with 6 to 10 paint producers. Now you look through all of your top picks, and you come up with the 10 or so that are most popular, came up the most often, most energy. And now you go from, you have been doing the divergent discovery, now you're going to go into the convergent preference interview. And that would look like, well, let me show you a quick video of what the discovery looks like first. I won't play the whole thing, but this is Meg Wheaton, the moderator, and this is pre-pandemic. And I'm going to just drop in the middle of the discovery interview while it's in problem section. So let me go here now.
First scene, we'll pick up the action as the moderator begins the problem section of the discovery interview. Watch for these two cases. First, when the moderator keeps probing an idea the customer has given, and the second case, when the moderator asks, what else, when she has finished probing an idea.
Okay, thanks for your help with those current state questions. It really filled in some of the gaps we had. Now, the rest of this meeting is about whatever is important to you. First, let's talk about problems. Anything is fair game here. It could be something in your manufacturing process or something your customers would like to see go away.
Well, in our focus groups, customers always say they wish it was easier to clean food stains from painted surfaces.
Any types of food in particular?
Homeowners can't always clean stains like mustard, barbecue sauce, ketchup, and so on, especially by just using common household cleaners.
Okay. What other problems are you having?
Well, this isn't a problem that our customers have, but we do in our manufacturing process, and that's grit particles. When resin suppliers don't filter their latex well before delivering it to us, it causes problems for us.
What kind of problems, Paul?
Well, we could ruin a whole batch, and that means we have to scrap out the pigments and all the other ingredients.
Does this ever become a problem for your customers as well?
Never. Our QC catches the problem before it gets to our customers.
Okay. What else?
So when the moderator asks, what else? Does she have any idea at all what the customer is going to say next? She really doesn't, does she? So a lot of people think, boy, we need to develop a brilliant list of questions. And we say, no, not really. You just know how to brilliantly probe whatever the customer says. So those are the skills we teach. Now, after this interview is done and a bunch of other ones, we've got all these top picks. So next, this team is going to do preference interviews. And in those preference interviews, they'll say, well, how important is it, Mr. Paint Producer, to minimize the time required to remove food stains from a painted surface? And the customer might say, oh boy, that's somewhere between very important and critical. So this gets slid over. And then they hit the next button and they say, well, how satisfied are you today with your ability to minimize the time required to remove food stains? And the customer might say, oh, that's barely acceptable. There's other things you can ask in a preference interview, but getting these 1 to 10 ratings is critical. And this is so important because you're forcing the customer to think really hard about this. And you're communicating in the language of math, where we can't let our confirmation bias say, oh, I think the customer really liked that idea of ours. We want to get this pure and unfiltered from the customer. Now, after you do all that, you build a market satisfaction gap chart. It's pretty simple. You take the average importance for the whole market, let's say it was a 9, times 10 minus the average satisfaction for the whole market. Let's say that was a 6. Now you'd have a market satisfaction gap of 36%. Now, if you get a gap of over 30%, that indicates that it's really important and not being satisfied, and the market is really eager to see you deliver this. The only thing they might pay us a premium for is something that's important that they're not getting. Now, we've done this with hundreds and hundreds of teams around the world for many years. And so we know when you get these 30%, 40%, 50%, it gives you a really clear picture of what you should be working on. That's how you drive out most commercial risk. So when Jim asked the question earlier, how many people are doing VOC? Well, a lot of them are talking to customers, but just talking to customers in kind of this unstructured way doesn't really get the job done. We believe, and we have some research that shows, you need to do qualitative and quantitative to really understand. So what are we doing here? We're really eliminating innovation errors. If you do these discovery interviews, you're going to stop errors of omission. That's failing to uncover an unarticulated need. And this happens all the time, but no team has ever faulted because nobody knows they omitted it at the time. But that's why we want to interview a number of companies. We want to get a number of job functions. We want to help them trigger more ideas so we don't miss an unarticulated need. Then this is super critical, doing this quantitative interview. This stops errors of commission, which is picking the wrong thing to work on. And this happens all the time as well. In fact, if you ask me, what is the single thing a company can do to boost its innovation success and its organic growth? It's this: Stop doing any significant product development in the development stage unless you have unbiased, unfiltered, quantitative evidence on what customers want. It's not that hard to do. It does not take that long. So you've got your technical risk. You're going to resolve that in the development stage. I mean, you wouldn't launch your product saying, I hope we can make this, right? When do you resolve your commercial risk? Most companies do this in the launch phase. Hey, Joe, how's your new product doing? I don't know, Dan. We're going to launch it next month. We'll see if anybody buys it. So they don't really know. What we want to do is build a certainty time machine and really develop, understand the customer's needs in the front end. So that's what we want to do, is understand these things. So does it work? Well, we've actually done some research on this where a lot of interviews were done. And what we found was companies or new product teams who did this work, some of them, about 16%, were on the right track already. You know, these interviews didn't impact their design very much, moderate or slight. However, 5 out of 6 teams said that the interviews had a great or significant impact. It's kind of like most companies are rolling this 6-sided die, and 5 out of 6 times they just don't understand what customers want. So back to you, Jim. I'm going to stop sharing here again.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. So our second how that we're going to get to here is on the virtual voice of the customer, which was 2 years ago we didn't talk about.
Right.
So let's get started here. So which is better, in-person VOC or virtual voice of the customer? They're both 2-hour interviews. So, who could argue that an in-person VOC holds more value, right? In person, you have a relationship building. You're able to watch body language. You can take customer tours. You can walk the process, walk the where the product is being used. And of course, the dialogue in the hallways and maybe dinner, which we all enjoy. But there's a downside, the 10 hours to get there up and back, right? Well, when does each of these make sense? So maybe it makes sense to do a virtual VOC, maybe better. So Dan and his team put together these list of 10 advantages of a virtual VOC. Fantastic. So lower cost, yeah, the T&E, the hours expended, the ability to have face-to-face meetings with dispersed customers can be a challenge. We know that. The viewing probing tips are easily available within the blueprinting tool. Training for colleagues that cannot attend due to travel restrictions, so you're able to leverage that much easier. Probing suggestions are integrated into the blueprinting tool. Assistance for note-taking can be also online and taken within the qualitative notes and very visible. That ensures rapid debriefing, and easier scheduling reduces the time to complete the customer interviews. So there's a low impact to cancellations and delays of these customer interviews. And then there's a greater project speed to get your products launched aligned to the customer's unmet needs the first time. So when you really look at this in retrospect, I think, Dan, you were way ahead of your time in building this tool, because you were ready when the pandemic hit. You want to do virtual VOC, you're kind of going, yeah, we're ready.
Well, it was serendipity. We're not glad the pandemic happened, but
no,
we realized that, gosh, if you're going to do some virtual VOC, it better be highly visual. And there were a number of things that just happened to be that our tools were pretty well tuned for that. In fact, I think maybe I can go ahead and should I share my screen and maybe just a couple slides, and we'll wrap this up here pretty soon.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good. Then so those are some reasons that Jim just went over on why it makes sense. But then, whoops, I thought I had it in the right spot here. Hang on a second. But then what about some tips for doing better VOC? We'll show you a white paper you can download in a minute. It'll give a few tips. Let me just hit a couple of them. First of all, I do think if you're going to have a web conference type of interview with Zoom, Teams, WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever it might be, you really need to make it visual. So whether you use something like we are showing you here, or you come up with something, make sure you're recording your notes so they can see it. We've noticed over the years that when customers can see your note taking, which I know sounds odd, it engages them so much more. They feel like they're part of it. They can correct you on a real-time basis. You'll find the interviews last longer. They just get more engaged. So make it visual whenever you're doing virtual VOC. Another tip is choose between these. Consider doing a hybrid. You know, in some cases, you might lean toward in-person. In some cases, you might lean toward virtual. If you're very comfortable with interviewing, it's easy to do the virtual VOC. If you've got a strong customer relationship, it's really easy to do virtual. Although we've had many client teams doing discovery with people they've never met before. Hard to do a tour with virtual. Preference interviews are incredibly easy to do virtually, although we see a lot of discovery interviews being done by web conference as well. If it's difficult to schedule, you'll find it's easier getting an hour and a half on their calendar. Travel costs high, go for the virtual. If you already have a lot of your interviews done, just get some statistical confidence by finishing up with virtual. Now, there are more tips on how to do this in this white paper. So just go out to virtualvoc.com, and we've got those 10 advantages explored in more depth. And we've got some tips on how to do really good virtual VOC. So I think at this point, Jim, we said maybe I should just give a very brief tour of what this looks like, and then turn it over to you to wrap this up. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go out here. And, we've been kind of at a high level. So let me take about 5 minutes. And Jim has got a handful of guest passes. So if you are interested in getting 30-day access to all of the tools we do and coming to a 2 half-day workshop, the public workshop, you should do them once or twice a month. Just ring up Jim, drop him an email. He'll give you the guest pass. So you can get in free. And basically, when somebody goes into blueprinting, they get this dashboard. There's a bunch of e-learning, a lot of job aids called Blue Tools. There's a massive knowledge center. They can go after certification, practitioner, and blue belt, and all that kind of stuff. But the real action takes place right here when we hit Open Blueprinter. This is where you do all your project work. So let's say you're working on for a packaging company, okay? First, you can start off in the market segmentation, and you might think about which different market segments you want to go into. And the columns are the criteria. You could do some ABCs, and you could use this to pick not an unattractive market with a lot of reds, but an attractive one. So that's a tool if you want help picking your market segment. But the real action takes place in the interviewing. This is what we showed you a little earlier. This is what the actual discovery interview looks like. You click on one of these, and you're recording. Your note taker is recording what the customer is saying, and you're probing. And then when you're done, you move to the next sticky note. And this is a great way of engaging them, getting a lot of good information. Now, when you're done with all of your discovery, you're going to go do preference interviews. And the preference interviews will look like this. You'll say, now again, this is a packaging company. How important is it to minimize the likelihood of box damage or moisture? And they might say, ooh, that's very important. Hit the next button, and you'd say, well, how satisfied are you today with your ability to minimize the likelihood of box damage or moisture? Ooh, that's fairly acceptable. And then you go through this, getting their ratings on all of these. This quantitative feedback is incredibly important. And then just to kind of wrap this up, you would look at all of your interviews, and you might see some big standard deviations, which should make us nervous. A market segment is defined as a cluster of customers with similar needs. Well, these guys agreed on vertical crushing and box tearing, but not on recycled content. So you may need to slice and dice your data a little bit more to get tighter standard deviations. And when you do, then you can feel comfortable looking at your bubble charts and seeing what these look like. And then especially your market satisfaction gap charts. And that's basically what you would close this out on. The last thing clients tend to do is create a market case. They would go through a few of these slides that you see here, just getting a little bit more information on what's involved in this. And then when they're done with it, they would hit the done button and they can create a PDF, a market case basically, that is used to go into the development stage. Here you see, project scope, strategic fit, and on page 2, the rest. And they can also download a set of slides for this sort of thing. So anyway, let me just open it up. Any questions on this before I get off of this and we wrap this all up? Any questions on software at all?
Yeah, a couple questions I see. One is, how many interviews do folks generally do with clients for a given market segment?
Yeah, good. So 6 to 10 is a good starting point. When you start to hear echoes, you're hearing things you've been hearing before, you're probably ready to wrap it up. What can drive the numbers higher? Well, many of our teams do global projects. So they need to get enough interviews in North America and Asia and Europe and Latin America. Also, many of our clients go down the value chain. They interview their direct customers, but they interview their customers' customers. There again, you need more interviews to get the data in. Good question.
And then how do you track all those? I mean, all those interviews, all those people going around, the costs. Do you have a way to help people track that?
Yeah, we do. So I jumped over some of these tools, but there's lots of scheduling tools we use. And I should also say this is cloud-based software. So you want your whole team to have access to this. So anybody can come in here. They can add in the companies we want to interview. There's prep sheets to kind of line up what questions we're going to start with, what trigger maps and all that. And so that really helps with the tracking quite a bit. Where a lot of companies get in trouble is after they do their qualitative interviews, they got all this data. They don't know how to manage it. And I don't have time to show you now, but there's a couple of steps in here where all your sticky notes, you can digitally move them around and stack duplicates up. And it makes it a really nice process for going from that divergent phase to now converging on 10 or so outcomes for preference. So there's a lot in here as far as managing the tool.
So are you using like sentiment analysis to help you with that? Or
well, what we do is we try to, I didn't go into this, but let me just share real quickly. At the end of discovery interviews, this is one of the teachings that we get into. We get top picks. And then what we do is we train our client teams how to convert those top picks into something called an outcome statement. Now, this is something Tony Ulwick at Strategy came up with. Brilliant concept. And so you got to get the wording right. You want to do it with the customers. But after teams get the hang of creating these outcome statements, it's very easy to say, oh, this one on recycled content, that came up on interviews 1, 4, 7, 9, and 10. And so we want to stack those duplicates on top with the tool. And so we get it down to a discrete number of outcomes. The ones that kept coming up, that had a lot of energy, obvious value, those are the ones we want to take into preference for 1 to 10 ratings.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Good. All right, then I will tell you what, I will stop sharing and let you take us down the home stretch here, okay?
All right. Well, thanks for the questions, everyone. Appreciate it. And Dan gave us a great overview of the tool. Very powerful tool, very flexible. And we would say probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of interviews using this tool.
Certainly tens of thousands, yeah, all around the world. In
every country. And you support multiple languages, right? We
do. There's 9 languages that we support. In fact, you can convert the interviews over the agenda to 9 different languages to make it a little easier for your customers being interviewed. Yeah.
So just a couple questions coming in. Let me just find this one. So somebody asked, should you do the discovery and preference interviews for all new product development?
Well, our rule of thumb is this. if you think you're going to invest one person year of R&D, engineering, chemist, whatever, if you think it's about one person year, we recommend doing the discovery and the preference and a market case. And I can tell you real quickly where that came from. So Bob Cooper did some research at the American Productivity and Quality Center. And what they found was if you get up to around 20% of your total product development work in the front end, you'll be much more successful. So we find that it takes no more than 3 person months of time to do this whole front end work. It's probably a lot less than that with virtual now, but we haven't recalculated. So take 3 person months of front end, take 12 months of R&D, add them together, you got 15 months, 3 over 15, 20%. So our recommendation is, as a starting point, if you think you're going to put about 1 person year in the lab of work and development, make sure you do the front end work, something along the lines of what we've described here.
So have you done any studies on before and after as far as coming up with good, strong outcome statements and developing new products and the overall product life cycle time, development cycle time? And
yeah, we've worked with a number of clients, and here's the most common thing when they run their data. We've worked with companies, $50 billion in sales. Well, actually, some well over 100 billion in sales, but they have a lot of projects, so they can get a lot of good data. And the thing we hear most often is this: they agree with the 25% success rate. Now, remember, that was measured once companies start the development stage, right? Which is where it really counts, right? That's where the money is, right? Once they start that, the data from Cooper says we're going to have 25% success rate. Our clients tell us when they implement blueprinting, they turn that up to about to 75% success rate. And how do they do that? Well, it's not just because they have more exciting projects. They do some of that, but they killed a lot of things in the front end that never should have been making their way into development in the first place. So now, instead of having all this commercial risk, their scientists and engineers are only working on technical risk. So if any of our guests are doing portfolio analysis and you're looking at your projects in your pipeline in the development stage and beyond, and you're measuring commercial and technical risk, and you have hardly any commercial risk, the really burning question is, why? Why are we doing this? Because you can drive out commercial risk in the front end just as easily as you can in the development or launch stage.
Excellent, Dan. And that really links into the de-risking tool. Is that the impetus to drive the de-risking tool and how you developed it?
Yeah, the impetus was we had lots of clients for many years doing blueprinting. They were going into familiar markets, but also into unfamiliar markets. Now, when you go into unfamiliar markets, there's some things that blueprinting doesn't accomplish. It's a little hard to get the interview set up. We had some ways of dealing with that. But there may be things that existing market is already getting today that we don't know about. So we brought in Minesweeper De-risking, another offering. And a way of thinking about it is this: blueprinting drives out almost all commercial risk. But if you've got a project that could have regulatory risk, technical risk, operational risk, as well as commercial risk, you need to cast the net a little more broadly. And so the Minesweeper framework that we offer does that.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. I think we're going to wrap up here. I think you have a weekly blog that you put out, Awkward Realities. You want to share with us that?
Yeah, these are all the things we do that seem like they're normal at the time, and later on we'll laugh at ourselves. Remember, before Deming, we thought it was normal to have inspectors at the end of the production line, and I knew salespeople who used to think ABC method of selling, always be closing, made sense until we learned about consultative selling. Someday we're going to laugh at ourselves that we didn't fully understand the needs of B2B customers. Now, that's one awkward reality. We have a little micro blog every Friday where we try to dive into some of these silly things we do. Very short.
Very good. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. So I'll just close out just to remind you that there are upcoming webinars, and we have a number of different webinar series going on. And we are under the guise of people, process, data, technology. We believe that all these are needed for business transformations to be sustainable. If you go straight to technology, it won't solve the problem. you need to bring in the people and the process, just like Dan demonstrated here with his tool, the new product blueprinting tool, because people are essential to this process. We have over 50 partners. This is a smorgasbord of a number of the partners in our team. But if you contact us and you have something transformational that you need support on, we feel very confident we'll be able to provide you that support. Again, thank you everyone for joining today and taking time out of your busy schedule, especially on Election Day. And Dan, do you have any closing comments before we sign off here?
No, just thank you for attending. And if you want to dig deeper, check with Jim and we'll talk to you at one of our workshops. Thanks, everybody.